So good morning and welcome here in Brussels to our roundtable discussion, water recycling as a cornerstone of resilient water supply in humid regions, practical lessons learned in the WaterMan project and conclusions for future policies in the EU, which is organized by Region Kalmar County in Sweden in collaboration with the Water Core Group of Euroregion Baltic and the Interreg Baltic Sea Region project WaterMan. I'm glad to see the participants here in the room at the Thon Hotel in Brussels, but I'm also glad to hear that we have also a lot of online participants, listeners today from many countries. I think we counted 8 or even 10 countries among the participants here that join online this event. And this is, I think, this shows that water recycling is an issue that is increasingly getting attention all over Europe nowadays. In the beginning, a little bit of a short word of introduction to the Euroregion Baltic Water Core Group that is organizing and hosting this event. It's a permanent international exchange and cooperation platform on water management for local and regional authorities in the Baltic Sea region, so in the northeast of Europe, embedded in the Euroregion Baltic cooperation and was founded 20 years ago in 2005. And the thematic focus of the Water Core Group were initially eutrophication of the Baltic Sea and water management in general, but in the last years increasingly also impacts of climate change, which became more and more evident also in the Baltic and relevant also in the Baltic Sea region, and it is the initiator of the WaterMan project, which is promoting water recycling as a contribution to more water resilience in the Baltic Sea region, and the host of today's roundtable discussion. Bringing water recycling in humid regions into practice, this is our focus and the focus of the WaterMan project. So the prerequisites are clear. What it needs for that to really bring it into everyday use are technical organizational solutions to do so, local actors that are willing to implement them, strategic approaches at local and regional level, but also support schemes and regulatory frameworks at national and EU level that support these actors in implementing and initiating water recycling. The goal of today's roundtable discussion of the WaterMan project, which is already the second of its kind, is to continue the policy dialogue on specific demands of water recycling in humid regions where it's still rather a new issue, while in the south of Europe it is a practice for many decades already and very widespread. And we continued a dialogue that we launched here in Brussels in January this year with the first roundtable discussion. And in the meantime, there have been new developments that we would particularly refer to today. On the one hand, the adoption of the EU Water Resilience Strategy in June this year, and on the other hand, the WaterMan project that is initiating and hosting this roundtable has proceeded, and there are now results available that we would also like to introduce and reflect on. So the focus of today's discussion will be what further support could encourage and help municipalities and local water companies in humid regions to start with water recycling also after pioneering work has been done in the WaterMan project. So we have a roundtable discussion, but we invite also the audience to actively take part, and both the audience here in the room, but also the audience that is participating online. So you may ask questions or leave your comments in the chat function, and my colleague Pia will help us then to transfer them here into the room and so that they are considered here as well. And in the beginning, I would like to introduce the participants of the roundtable discussions here in the room. So it is here, it's Loïc Charpentier from WaterMan Europe. He's the head of advocacy there and involved as an expert in formulating the report of the Committee of Regions on the implementation of the water resilience strategy. This is ongoing work at the moment. We have next to him Emmanuel van Houten from Aquaduin, a water company here in Belgium, in Flanders region. And he's also a board member of Water Reuse Europe. And he's one of the pioneers of water recycling in humid regions, having a mature water reuse scheme for almost 30 years, 23 years. At the coastline of Belgium. So welcome, Emmanuel. Then we have Klara Ram, representing here the Economic Chamber Polish Waterworks, the Renutri Water Project, which is also dealing with the reuse of municipal wastewater in the Baltic Sea region, and also Euro, the network here, so having the utility perspective here in the roundtable represented as well. And last but not least, Pia Schumann from the Berlin Center of Competence for Water. She was or is a partner in the WaterMan project and had there the task to advise the local water companies and municipalities in designing and implementing the water recycling measures that were piloted within the project. And my name is Jens Masuch. I'm the WaterMan project manager, and I have the pleasure to guide you through this roundtable discussion today. And in this list, you see, and when you look here, there is one person missing, unfortunately, and that is Tobias Facchini from Region Kalmar County, who is the lead partner of WaterMan and also the coordinator of the Water Core Group of Euroregion Baltic. He is here around, but unfortunately he fell ill overnight, so he cannot hold his presentation. We will together try to compensate this as good as possible, and it will be then also my task, besides the moderation, to present the slides and the inputs that he prepared in the first part of the roundtable discussion. A word on the agenda, very short, you know it from before. After the welcome and introduction, we will have two inputs, two lectures, on the one hand by Loïc, who will present, give us an update on present and upcoming policy initiatives in the EU related to water resilience and water recycling, and the inputs on practical experiences and recommendations for future policies out of the WaterMan project that was planned to be given by Tobias Facchini, but which I will try to take over as good as possible. And after that, we will have here a panel discussion with the speakers, but which should also involve the audience here in the room and the online audience via the chat function. So this is it for an introduction of the arrangement and the setup of the roundtable. And the topic, as I said, is water recycling in humid regions. And in order to set the scene a little bit, so the question is, what is it about? What is water recycling? A rather unusual term, I would say, still in the EU context for this topic. And also, what is specific about water recycling in humid regions? Why do we stress this? And in order to introduce it, I would like to show in the beginning a short movie that was prepared by within the WaterMan project, and which gives a short introduction to the topic.
Water scarcity is no longer a problem only in southern Europe. Many parts of the Baltic Sea region are now also facing recurring droughts. This is a turning point for local water management. For decades, drinking water seemed abundant, available everywhere and at all times. It was normal to use it for nearly all human purposes. Most of this water came from groundwater. After being used, it was cleaned in treatment plants before being discharged into rivers, lakes, or the sea. Return to the natural purification cycle, evaporation and infiltration cleaned it further, until it was ready to be used as drinking water again. But climate change has disrupted this linear system of water usage. In many places, it no longer provides enough drinking water when it is needed. This raises the question, do we really need to use drinking water for all our human needs? If we accept that different purposes require different qualities of water, new opportunities emerge to stabilize our supply. Municipal wastewater, for example, can be reused. With the right treatment, it becomes suitable for many purposes that do not require drinking water quality, such as the watering of parks, industrial processes, or irrigation in agriculture. Water can even be used twice within a household, first for a shower, then for flushing the toilet, creating small recycling loops even in our homes. And in a humid area like the Baltic Sea region, where climate change creates extremes of sometimes far too much and at other times far too little water, rainwater is becoming a valuable resource as well. Instead of letting it seep away until it slowly reappears as groundwater, we can capture it directly at the surface and put it to good use. All of these measures add shortcuts to the grand natural purification cycle. Smaller loops that make water available more quickly. This is water recycling in the truest sense of the word. By introducing such tighter cycles to the water management in the Baltic Sea region, we create new tools to help stabilize local water supply and reduce the risk of human needs being compromised by temporary shortages of drinking water. The Baltic Sea region will not turn into a desert anytime soon, but climate change challenges the way we use water. We need to rethink priorities. Drinking water should be reserved for where it is truly required. For everything else, recycled water can keep our landscapes green, our industries running, and our fountains flowing for future generations. Visit the BSR Water Recycling Toolbox and get inspired.
So that is what water recycling in humid regions like the Baltic Sea region is all about. And the question here, being here in Brussels, is of course, what is going on the policy level? Yeah? Can we expect that putting water recycling into practice, also in humid regions, will get stronger support in the future? And there were especially two developments that we were observing with great interest. On the one hand, it was the adoption of the water resilience strategy and now the dialogue on its implementation, as well as the anticipated evaluation and also revision of the water reuse regulation that is set to be due in 2028, and I'm happy that Loïc Charpentier from Water Europe will now give us a little bit of a policy update and tell us what is the state of discussion and what is going on here in Brussels at the moment.
Can I? Yeah, perfect. So, good morning, everybody. So I will give you a little bit of context before having the panel discussion. And before all, I would like to let you know who we are as Water Europe, like this you know where you are putting your feet in. So Water Europe, we are the European Association of the Innovative Water Sector. So we represent more than 300 members across all the European Union and the value chain, from multinational public authorities, civil society organizations, but also utilities, suppliers, and large industrial users. And the biggest college, if I can say like this, is the research center and university. So we have more than 100 university and RTOs part of the network. We have two specificities. The first one, so we are a multi-stakeholder association, and the second one, we are a purpose-driven association. So we aim to achieve what we call a water smart society. So you have the definition on the screen. I will not read it for you, but more or less we put the value of water at the middle of our activities. We try to ensure security, sustainability, and resilience of the water cycle. And we have identified 5 areas where we need to have some actions. The first one is the diversification of water sources, the digitalization of the sector, the improvement of the governance, and also investment in circular water loops, and the investment also in infrastructure, and partly for hybrid grey-green infrastructure. Now, if we go to the big piece of cake that we have in Europe right now, for the last, in fact, 3 years, it's the European Water Resilience Strategy. So issued in June. This strategy has 3 objectives. The first one is to restoring and protecting the water cycle, so mainly to provide water for everybody, build a water smart economy, and securing clean and affordable water and sanitation for all. This last mission is mainly for international perspective, and it's linked to the activities of the European Commission during the UN Water Conference. So to do that, some elements that are extremely key in the strategy. The first one, it's the subsidiary principle. The European Commission put really at the beginning the importance to respect this principle, so and recognize the importance of solution at the local level. So this document is more a direction that they are going with 50 actions. You do not have a lot of regulatory modification that we can expect in the coming years, but mainly action with local and regional actors to implement the EU water acquis and to improve our competitiveness, and also to comply with all the commitment that the European Union took during the previous years. If we look at the first objective, restoring the water cycle, you have 4 key elements in the presentation that the Commission did. The first one, they want to adopt a source-to-sea approach, and this is mainly linked to the revision of one directive, the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, that is planned by the European Commission, and they want to make sure that it aligns with the water acquis, so mainly the Water Framework Directive, the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, where we see some inconsistencies in the different implementation, and partly for the monitoring of the pollutant. Another one is the investment in infrastructure. The European Commission look at the financial gap that we have. They estimate this gap at 23 billion euros per year, but that is a partial gap, if I can say like this, because they are not looking to the flood directive and only partially to the water framework directive. So the gap is bigger. And here, if we look from the OECD estimate this gap. If we just want to comply with the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive and the Drinking Water Directive, the gap is 255 billion euros for all the European countries. So no UK anymore. So this is quite interesting because in the strategy you have a list of financial tools that the different stakeholders can mobilize to make the investment. The other one is the implementation of the water acquis, but also tackling nutrient pollution and the pollutant of emerging concern. Here, the main element is linked to the PFAS partly. This was a big push that we saw during the last 2 years to have a discussion and to find technology to remove PFAS at a cheaper price. With cheaper processes. So you will have an action run by the European Commission and the GRC in the coming months and years in this direction. It will be also part of the next Horizon Europe as a key topic. So some projects under the Research and Innovation Fund will be linked to the PFAS dossier. But more or less, this first part look at the implementation of all the regulatory framework that we have already in Europe. If we continue a little bit, the second part is building a water smart economy. And here it's a good move, I would say, from the European Commission. Water has always been seen as an environmental topic only, and it's a DG Environment who has the lead on this topic mainly. And for the first time, they are looking a little bit beyond, and they look at industrial water use and the economic perspective that you can have. We know that at the global level, we will have a deficit of water supply if we compare to the water demand. And the European Commission tried to bring some solution or inspiration to try to tackle this challenge. The discussion that you had with the economic actors here was mainly on data collection, interoperability of the data, and also water efficiency. And inside the water efficiency, you can have recycling water here. So the European Union put this aspirational target of 10%. And now the big question mark that we have here is, what do you call water efficiency target or saving in this context? And the principle, how we will implement that. So the big discussion that we start to have now is on the methodology to assess and to implement and to assess this 10% target. Also, in terms of on data, what we saw and what we are now listening, it's the digitalization of the water sector partly aims to reduce leakage, to have leakage reduction, I would say, and partly for the utilities. So they want to improve data collection in this perspective, and also to improve data collection in terms of reduction of pollutions. We had, I have the word in Belgium, in a marine way, about data collection and bathing water directive implementation, where we have some difficulties in terms of assessing the quality of bathing area, and digital tools can be useful. So that is something that we foresee here, and also a connection with all the industrial activities that you can have in a river basin and can pollute the bathing area. So here, this is the part where we can see a huge potential in terms of water reuse and recycling. The revision of the water reuse regulation also enter partially in this block, because the objective is to open up the scope and to go beyond the agricultural purposes, and to see for domestic and industrial use of water reuse. The last part is a clean and affordable water for all. So, as I was explaining, it's mainly linked to the international perspective and the One Health approach also. That comes also with the fact that we revised the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, but mainly that was driven by the UN Water Conference discussion that the European Commission had in New York. So they will launch some project. But if you look, for example, the pilot project for smart metering, we put it here, but it's also mentioned in the two first one. So you have some interconnection between the 50 actions that you can have, but mainly it will be linked to empower consumer, the UN perspective, and a little bit the implementation of the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, but that is mainly linked to the first block. But I think the most interesting now that we have is about the financial tool. In this document, and this is a big opportunity that we will see in the next 3 years, it's a discussion of the multi-annual financial framework of the European Union, so the budget for 7 years. In the water resilience strategy, the European Commission just listed the financial opportunity that we have right now in the current MFF. They didn't want to go beyond because we are starting the discussion for the next budget, and they cannot take right now a position on it. But this list is quite interesting because it demonstrates that we have a lot of opportunities to get money, but some of them are not really used. If we look, for example, to the cohesion policy, we see that water has been a priority always in the framework provided by the European Union. But when we arrive at the level of the region, generally water disappeared. So you have a structural deficit of use, deficit in the use of the money from the cohesion policy for water. While we know that this type of fund is extremely useful for local and regional authorities, but also for the utilities to make the relevant investments. And after, another element and conclusion that we have was the lack or a white spot in terms of stimulating private investment for water reuse or recycling activities. The return of investment is a little bit higher for industry. You have some difficulties also to clusters the different activity to have a cascading effect between the different industrial plants in the same region. So you have different way to squeeze the EU legislation and the national legislation to go for water reuse in a cluster. You have an example, for example, in Denmark, where they have a multiple contract between different industry to exchange wastewater. And if you go, for example, in Italy, they created a standalone utility for recycling industrial water, and you have all the shareholders of the utilities are the industrial companies. So that is something that we see missing. And with the water reuse regulation and the budget, we would like to see potentially stimulated. And I would like to speak also about this this study that we run in the context of the water resilience strategy, but it was interesting first to have this data on 255 billion euros in terms of gap, financial gap, to comply with the EU legislation. And I was mentioning two of them, but it's the old version because this data came from a study in 2019. But also the study assess 4 critical sectors, strategic sector for the green transition: semiconductor, hydrogen, batteries, semiconductor, and data center. All of them will increase the pressure on the utilities and the water sources, and we will need to find alternative solution and alternative water sources to reduce the pressure that we can have and to make sure that we have water at the right quality at the right moment for everybody. Continuing a little bit on the budget, because clearly the big opportunity that we have. Our community came with this proposal after the Commission suggestions for the shaping of the next budget. So they are requesting 300 billion euros. It can be a big number, but when we assess the need of 255 billion just to comply with 2 directives, and the first spot that you have in the proposal right now include the cohesion policy, include the common agricultural policy, you will need at least 255 billion during 7 years just to make sure that we comply with the whole EU acquis. The second one is the ECF, which is a competitiveness fund that von der Leyen suggested. It will merge around 10 funds in one, plus Horizon Europe inside. And here, the 35 billion euro request, it's the equivalent of 1/5 of the economic damage per year that we had for floods. So the idea is really to not pay, to not make the EU pay for private investment, but just to make sure that we can stimulate clustering action and water saving or recycling water processes for industrial activities, and also the research and innovation objective. And the last part is the 10 billion for the Union Civil Protection Mechanism. Here it's also a way to where you can see some opportunities for recycling water and partly linked to water retention. You have some example also here of weaponization of water infrastructure that or dual use of infrastructure that could be interesting. If we take, for example, Estonia, they have a project now to restore wetlands on the eastern part of the country. You have two objectives: comply with nature restoration laws. Second one, to avoid tank invasion from Russia. So that is a type of I can say win-win situation that you can have. Last 2 weeks ago, for example, the Ukrainian government bombed a dam in Belgorod with two objectives. The first one is to stop the Russian by flooding most of the region, and also to release the water because this river is going after in Ukraine. So that is a type of also infrastructure that needs to be protected or to be improved, and we have the possibility here with recycling water processes to have something. Just one point on that: the ECF will also strongly increase the financial allocation for military purposes and defense purposes. So all the digital policy, defense policy, and water policy will be a key triangle if we want to have money for the sector, I would say. Last part, also a topic that a project like WaterMan or the local and regional authorities like the county in Sweden or Wallonia or Flanders, it's the national plan that the European Commission tried to put. You have a big pushback from the Parliament right now, but the European Commission has the idea to put this plan in a bilateral dialogue with the different member states to see how they will implement the budget. And here, the local and regional authorities, but the national, regional, and local stakeholders have a strong opportunity to push for water reuse, water saving, and recycling. The budget, the two key actors for the budget is the member state and the European Commission. So clearly on that part, it's where the opportunity for recycling water can be unlocked in the coming years. A last point, because we have some region also in the audience, is the Committee of the Region and the Water Resilience Strategy. For having the strategy, you had two institutions who were actively engaged in this topic during the last 3 years. The first one was the European Economic and Social Committee, representing the interests of the social stakeholders, but also the economic stakeholders. They were pushing for an EU Blue Deal. And the second one was the Committee of the Region. They issued two opinions last year before the publication of the strategy, one from the Committee Agriculture, and the other one from the Committee Envy. The both options were considered by the European Commission for preparing the strategy. You have a new one now in preparation that we expect to have in end of Q1 26, voted by the plenary assembly. And it aims to clarify how the local and regional authorities can contribute to the implementation of the water resilience strategy and the 50 actions that you have inside. So you have the timeline on the screen, but where you see, I think, a strong interest from the Committee of the Region, first, it's on the financial support that they will need. Secondly, it's also about research and innovation and capacity building, including skills, which is extremely important for the local and regional authorities to provide the right skills to the workers. And also all what is linked to civil protection and preparedness. Here, including international cross-border cooperation. And here, what is important is how they can manage flood and drought and reuse this water. So either by reintegrating in the groundwater to facilitate the infiltration, or to store this water, reuse for other purposes. So also the Committee of the Region is an opportunity because they will be the one in the driving seat for the implementation at the end. And so to wrap up and summarize a little bit, the opportunity that you will see right now, it's the implementation of the new EU water acquis. So we have the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, the Industrial Emission Directive, for example, that have been revised in the last 2-3 years. So this will be an opportunity to find some recycling water processes and try to push for it. The promotion of NBS also will be extremely important. The discussion for the Common Agricultural Policy implementation and objective is really linked to water retention and how NBS or artificial retention infrastructure can be used. The recast also of the EU regulation related to water reuse will be quite interesting here. You have from the water community a big push in the Circular Economy Act to open up this the water reuse for industrial use. And also, I think, quite a consensus in the omnibus environment, which is a legislation that aims to simplify the environmental acquis. So although the water community is clear here, we should not reopen the dossier at that stage, except maybe the water reuse regulation. But the most important in the implementation and to find financial lines to support this implementation. So the finance, of course, will be extremely important. The mobilization of the Committee of the Region and the EEC is also key because they are the direct representative of the local socio-economic stakeholders from all our regions. So they have a voice, and the example that we had from the water resilience strategy is extremely important, that they were quite leaders in getting this strategy. And the last part that I would like to stress is the water-oriented living lab approach. It's a concept coming from Scandinavia in the 70s, but the European Union is now putting more emphasis on these tools through different policy. The first one is the research and innovation policy with Horizon Europe. You have also a partnership between 30 member states and associate states called Water for All Partnership, where they are actively involved in. And also we saw this concept popping up in the zero pollution strategy, where the question of protecting the water sources has been included in it. So this also could be a way or some opportunities to build on your outcome and try to expand the applicability of your activities. Yep.
Thank you very much. There will be also the opportunity for questions from the online participants later on. We will take them during the panel discussion, but maybe at this point here to the audience here in the room, are there any questions, immediate question to Loïc and his presentation? Okay. Yes.
So, yeah, thank you very much for your presentation. Very informative. My name is Machtel van Dijk. I work for the Dutch region of Noord-Brabant in the south of the Netherlands, also working actively on all policies related to water in a broad sense. So water quality, but also much more on water quantity. Therefore, we're also really happy that it's such a big part in the water resilience strategy. But I have a question. I thought it was really interesting what you said about the triangle that you see in the European competitiveness funds between defense, competitiveness, was it defense, defense, digitalization, I think, and then the third, of course, water. And that if we really want to see actions the coming years on water, then we should think also in this triangle. How do you? I can see it from like a more water smart angle, but especially the water quality angle is really a challenge there, especially when you look, of course, of the impact of defense, especially when you look at PFAS and how that influences also, in a bad sense, water quality. So could you elaborate a little bit on that?
This is the famous case from the Netherlands with PFAS and and the military activities. You have in the military activities, it's not an economic activity, but it's an activity. So you will have pollution. They need water for all the industrial complex, but after you will have pollution by the exercise or the warfare activity, I would say. You have currently discussion about PFAS used in different, partly from the foam that they were using. If I'm not mistaken, last week the ECA prohibited the use of PFAS inside. So that is part of it. But I think it's a good point that you have this triangle, for example, the stimulation of research and innovation that you could have to overcome some pollution could go in this pot, I can say. You have Horizon Europe, so it's a good element. You have the defense, the money for defense. The full pot will be multiplied by 2, in fact, in this proposal. But after we remain at the first step, it's a marathon for the budget. We need 3 years of negotiation. So the outcome that we have now will change in 3 years. But that is one of the elements that we can push in terms of quality, in terms of quantity, but also keep in mind that we had a strong push now from the community on the quantity aspect, but the European Union is not responsible for quantity, it's only the quality part. So at the end, it will be the local and regional authorities or the national government who will deal with that. So you have, for example, in France, a plan for water efficiency and diversification of water sources for industrial activities, including military one. But if you that is France's centralized system. I think in the Netherlands it will be the same, but in Belgium it will be mainly the provincial level and the regional level that we need to deal with. And some challenges that you will have also, beyond the defense aspect, is a cross-border perspective. The flood that we have in Wallonia 2 years ago demonstrated some challenges in terms of communication between the two sides of the borders, including between Flanders and Wallonia. So that part also will be extremely key. So it's not only a question of finance, but also a question of dialogue that you can have. And for the military aspect that we saw in the Netherlands, Luzet Kroon is extremely active on this topic, and I think for connecting the dot and trying to find a consensus between all of them, she's doing a good job for the last 2-3 years.
One more question, Martin.
Thank you. Martin Broberg from the regional representation of the South Swedish regions of Småland, Blekinge, Halland. First of all, thanks a lot for this very good presentation. I have 2 questions. First, a sort of general question on Water Europe's view on the water resilience strategy. From my point of view, reading the strategy, I expected more, I think, especially when it comes to legislation. I think the Commission could have been a little bit more ambitious there. From Water Europe's point of view, do you also see that, or do you think it's sort of overall well balanced? And then the second question relates to the competitiveness fund and the policy windows. I just see that the water-related issues are absent there. Are you worried about that? And could you, maybe elaborate a little bit on that from your side?
So thanks for the two questions. I will start with the first one. I think it's a question of balance. We had the previous commission that revised a lot. So the parliament, for example, and a lot of stakeholders were tired, and we need to implement this legislation. So that is a first element. The drinking water directive, the reuse regulation, the urban wastewater treatment directive, the industrial emission directive, it's 4 big pieces that we need to implement. So let's see, try to implement, make the money available for that, and then we can go. All the legislation are not perfect. If we look at the Water Framework Directive, it's quite old now. We can make some improvement, but first the implementation. So I think at that moment we are not in favor of revising legislation, except maybe the reuse regulation to improve it, because it's here where we see a lot of barriers for circular processes. For the rest, we will focus on the implementation. And it's also a question of legal security. If you want to make investment in the water sector, you make investment for 50 years. If we start to make a modification of the legislation every 5 years, it's already quite tough for a local policymaker to make the investment. So let's simplify his life or her life with this dossier. It doesn't mean that we do not have elements that we would like to see improved, but if we can avoid to reopen a legislation, let's avoid that. And it's why for the omnibus environment, the position of Water Europe is do not reopen any legislation at that stage, implement. And we are partly scared about the urban wastewater treatment directive and the EPR scheme that the pharmaceutical sectors and the cosmetic sector wants to destroy. But that is extremely important for the financial viability of the utilities, that we maintain these proportionate tools for them. So, yeah, and I'm sure that Euro and Aqua Publica and EWA, we are on the same line here. So that for the first one. For the second question, rapidly on the ECF, water is not in. I'm not surprised. Water has been always linked to the environmental dossier. Or the ECF is mainly a pot for DG Connect, DEFI, GROW, than DG Environment. So we will need to make it work. Here we have already warnings from our members that they cannot anymore provide the technology needed to the industrial actors to secure the water provision for the industrial activities. So it means that if it's not the political level that will make the move, it will be the reality. We have already some, in Norway, for example, reduction of water allocation for energy production. We already saw that last summer. In Spain also, a lot of issue, but we are working in this direction. We want to make money for stimulating this type of investment, but at the end, the business model will do the job. So if it's not the public who can provide a framework and coordinate a little bit and facilitate the clustering system, they will need to do it on spot. The lesson that we have also from our members is currently the legal framework and the political framework is not really fitted for facilitating this type of activities, and they need to figure out to have a, let's say, creative solution to implement and to figure out a solution.
Okay, thank you very much, Loic, for answering these questions. I would suggest that we go on with questions also to Loic later on when we are here having the panel discussions with all our 5 participants. Before we do that, I would like to come to the next agenda points, and that is after we have heard the policy perspective and heard what is going on with regard to regulatory frameworks, but also funding schemes for water recycling in Brussels. And I would kind of summarize it for myself and for the WaterMan project with that there is hope and there are opportunities in the interplay of, in particular, the water reuse regulation and the new financial framework to secure more substantial funding for water recycling, also in humid regions, and the time to influence this process is right now. Luc, maybe one question. You mentioned the time plan for the Committee of the Region opinion on the water resilience strategy. When it comes to the water reuse regulation and its evaluation, is there also a schedule, evaluation and then maybe also revision? Is there also a schedule already kind of visible or anticipated for that?
No.
Good.
Very short.
Clear answer.
No. Right now, the Commission is taking the 50 actions that you have inside, and one by one they are processing. They are not. They didn't reach yet this block. So we just have the date in the annex, the target around 28. But for the rest, we have no time, and you will see it with. On the Have Your Say portal, when they will open generally the consultation, you have the starting point and you can calculate for the rest.
Okay, good. Thank you for clarifying that. So let's come to a totally different perspective on the topic, and that is now, I would call it the grassroots perspective on water recycling in human regions. And it was supposed to be presented by Tobias Facchini, the coordinator of the ERB Water Core Group and the WaterMan lead partner, who unfortunately fell in. So I will do my best to present Tobias' slides today and to introduce to you practical experiences from the WaterMan project, in which water recycling was put into practice in the last 3 years in the Baltic Sea regions, and deriving from that also some inputs for the discussion on future policies in the EU. Yeah, shortly about the WaterMan project. So its goal was to promote water recycling in the Baltic Sea region, and very specifically to help municipality and water companies in particular to get started with water recycling in everyday practice. And it is a question of, it's a project of practitioners, for practitioners, and involves 15 project partners from 6 humid countries: Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Poland, Lithuania, and Latvia, mostly municipalities and water companies, so really the hands-on perspective here, which are supported by regional authorities, domain expert, and network organization. And it involved, when it comes to the activities that were implemented in the last 3 years, it involved 10 pilot measures that brought different exemplary use cases of water recycling into practice, the elaboration of local and regional strategies for water recycling in 7 model regions, and on top of that, information, competence development, policy dialogue, like the Roundtable here today. So it was a very hands-on project. Here you see also the geographic scope of the project. Here you see our model regions. You see also the 6 participating countries here and the location of the pilots. Maybe a word on the pilot actions and the measures, and also their nature. They were kind of not tailored on innovation, but in bringing the state of the art into practice. So this was the specific focus on them. And to give you some examples, it was very low threshold solutions. So it was kind of, to put it very, very simple, It was kind of the advancement of retention ponds for stormwater management by tap points that enabled also to reuse, to recycle the retained stormwater here. That was a pilot in Västervik, a real-world pilot that was carried through. There were also kind of a focus on more innovative and first-time solutions, but which may sound surprising sometimes, but have in the Baltic Sea region a high replication potential. For example, there was a pilot of recycling public swimming pool water in Braniewo in Sweden. And there were also feasibility studies that were focusing on issues that have strategic importance in the long run, and this refers also to something that Loïc mentioned already. So one of them was, for example, how to supply power-to-X hydrogen generation on the Bornholm Island with the needed water, with the help of municipal wastewater recycling and reuse. So these are three examples, and these were kind of carried through in the last 2.5 years in an intensive project. So now to the inputs and the experience report that I will present on behalf of Tobias. So what is the origin and nature of the following policy inputs, putting this into practice? So what I present here is now really the hands-on perspective of practitioners of municipalities and local water companies that refer to concrete experience and lessons learned in the last 3 years with relation to the strategies and the pilots that I just mentioned in the WaterMan project. And they refer also to real-life experiences with, for example, authorities, by these actors, with bringing water recycling into everyday practice within the current policy and regulatory frameworks in these countries, including the EU Water Reuse Regulation. And the inputs are now led by the question is, based on this pioneering work, how could it be made easier for municipalities and water companies and UBIT regions and in the future to get started with water recycling and to implement similar activities at a broader scale. So this is the origin, and before I go into that and to give a little bit of a content to the recommendations and our points, maybe just shortly, I do not want to repeat the movie, but just revisiting and specifying what means water scarcity in humid regions. It's a bit different than in semi-arid south regions of South Europe. So what is important to mention and to remember that here scarcity alternates with periods of too much water, and that turns rainwater and stormwater both into a problem with floods, but also into a resource that can be used to stabilize water supply. We also have to mention that water scarcity does not refer in this region to water in generally, but to the availability of drinking water, because this is the water that is used so far because of its abundance for almost all human needs. So this is important to stress, and also to make it clear that water scarcity is not only caused by less availability due to climate change, but of course also by more demand, industry, tourism season, and in particular when more demand and less availability comes together, then there is a problem. And these problems and the challenges of water supply, this is so far mostly a temporary shortage of drinking water in specific, geographically rather limited and small areas, not all over the regions, and also usually over shorter periods. So this is important to keep in mind as a background. But it is also, and I mentioned this, that on the one hand it is time limited and also geographically, but there are experiences with water scarcity and also with even compromising and suspending human needs for a while in almost all places in the Baltic Sea regions nowadays. In the last years, 2019 was, for example, an extreme drought year. But these are kind of episodical experiences, and it is seen increasingly as a challenge in general public, but it is not acknowledged yet everywhere and consistently of an issue of strategic importance that would justify a radical policy shift or even larger investments into new infrastructure. So this is kind of the setting that we have to keep in mind. To go further about the operationalization of water recycling in humid regions, again, making it a bit different from semi-arid regions in South Europe, where it is a practice since many decades already. That here, considering also how scarcity, how the supply situation looks like, it can build on 3 pillars, and these 3 pillars should be examined with equal attention, or need to be examined with equal attention to make water recycling an effective contribution to water resilience. And these 3 pillars are rainwater, are recycling loops within households and industry, and are the reuse of municipal wastewater. So it is a little bit broader than in South Europe from our perspective, and and rainwater and stormwater, of course, is a very important element that has to be kept in mind here. When having these pillars spoken out, then what does it boil out to operationalize water recycling? It boils down to answering 2 questions, and not to answer them on the level of humid regions in general or the Baltic Sea region as a whole, but to answer them on the local level, because here the scarcity occurs, and these 2 questions is what specific human needs in the local context may, for which of them may the use of drinking water be replaced by water of lower qualities, and if there are such opportunities, are there alternative local water resources available that can be utilized to supply such fit-for-purpose water and satisfy these demands? So it is kind of very clear and a very local setting here to operationalize it. And we can also say after 3 years and our experiences that in many cases already with these 3 pillars and considering kind of these solutions as a substantial stabilization of local water supply can be achieved in the Baltic Sea region, and we say maybe in humid regions as in general. So having that said, that this is the needs and how to operationalize it. So the question is, how should effective strategies at local and regional level, and this is where the strategies have to be located and have to be drafted, look like? So here we must say that each single water utilization that can be served with non-potable, with non-drinking water, and or from alternative sources helps to stabilize the local water supply. So of course it would be ideal to have systematic analysis and identification of potentials of water recycling on the demand side, on the supply side, and along with climate change projections. But what is already great help, and a good start is just that municipalities have concrete action plans that bring low threshold measures that are driven by local actors into practice. So to focus on the feasible, and then you have already a considerable effect. This is what we have seen, and a special potential is here because it is not seen yet widely as a sector that would justify larger public investments. It's that to use, when selecting also measures for these strategies, to use synergies with acknowledged and accepted investment needs, because those can improve cost-benefit ratio of water recycling measures. To give 3 examples, there is a need to upgrade the wastewater treatment plant because of the recast urban wastewater treatment directive, and from this kind of level of treatment, it is only a small step to go into water recycling, and the investment need is then not big, but only a small on top kind of contribution that is necessary. We can also see the example that I mentioned in flood prevention. If there are retention ponds for stormwater management, if they are placed close to water users or users of recycled waters, and you add a tap point, then with low efforts you go into water recycling by using an investment that actually was earmarked for other purposes. Or it can also be creating recycling loops when reconstructing public building. This is something municipalities or regions have direct influence on, or private buildings by making rainwater harvesting and dual pipe systems for grey water, for example, compulsory. And this is something, these are these small measures, and they can sum up already to effects that make sense, and this is something that should have been paid attention to. When it comes to designing meaningful technical organizational solutions, there we have to say that a wide range of water recycling solutions, there is a wide range that can be implemented already right away and based on available and major technology. We have partly even turnkey solutions that you can purchase from suppliers, and that you could start, that municipalities and local water management could start already without need for further technological innovation. This is something that we got a validation, a proof of in the project. A smart choice of solution is, of course, always to adapt field-tested solutions, which are available in particular in South Europe, but also in Central Europe, like, for example, Emmanuel and his scheme in Flanders shows, and also utilizing networks and resources that are available, like, for example, Water Reuse Europe, like Water Europe, like these networks that connect kind of actors in this field. A first choice, also very clear to say, that can be recommended for any municipality, any region, is to first concentrate on low-hanging fruit, because we experience that if you bring something in practice, this is a game changer for the public awareness and also a door opener for further measures. Yeah? Once water recycling works, even at a small scale, yeah, it is clear what it means, because it's a complex issue that is not so easy to understand without concrete examples. And then, of course, a consolidating choice in the further perspective are tailored solutions developed step by step for the specific local situations that address main strategic potentials and long-lasting effects, like, for example, the water reuse scheme that Emmanuel represents in Flanders, that I would see that has been developed over years and also refined in this course. So this is what could be done with returns to water recycles, but of course it needs also regulatory frameworks and institutional frameworks that enables these activities and measures. And there we identified obstacles. And when we come there with this regard to inputs and to wishes, then one wish is that to continue and to go all the way of the paradigm change in local water supply from cost efficiency to climate resilience. And that means, because at the moment the drivers of the process are utilities and they are stick to cost efficiency paradigm, yeah, it needs in the end to make local and regional authorities as the drivers for the change request, because only them can formulate the missions of the utilities of the local water companies. When going this way, it means then also when if municipalities and local authorities decide to go this way, that there should also be a kind of financial support for going this more costly way. That is definitely more costly than just to continue operating an already existing infrastructure, and for especially funding in the costly initial investments to get water recycling started up in municipalities. And it would also mean to enable local water companies to incentivize water recycling. And that may imply to allow them to sell, but also to charge different prices of water of different qualities. This might be kind of to make them a more universal water supplier. This may be an action here, and if applicable, also in some countries we see that there are strict ties between production costs and consumer costs for water, and they of course also prevent that there is a strategic pricing that could be implied. And last but not least, putting this further and referring also to the 3 pillars, once again, rainwater, smaller loops, but then also municipal wastewater, it would also mean to encourage and support the integration of local wastewater companies and local drinking water companies to enable integrated local strategies across all the 3 pillars. We see in the Baltic Sea region that this institutional setting is still fragmented, and that leads to frictional losses, to barriers of implementing water recycling in the sense that we have presented and that we believe that makes sense for human regions. So, boiling this down, these general applications, and also referring now to what has presented, and on the one hand the resilience strategies and also the water reuse regulation. When it comes to the resilience strategies, there was a lot of notion of research and development, and here we say because the solutions are already there that can be applied, we believe that there should be a strong focus on the rollout of real-world and on-scale water recycling measures that are based on field-tested and validated solutions. So this is something to get started and to create concrete experiences in the first step. We believe also that it would need specific support programs, not only for utilities, but also for local and regional authorities to develop and adopt strategies and action plans for stabilizing water supply with water recycling. This is something also because they may need to be the drivers, and they are the drivers also in the WaterMan project mainly. And also very important, it needs also a hands-on ecosystem, and not only in the design, but in the operationalization. We see in the project that there are specialized laboratory services and missing to do, for example, risk management when doing water reuse in line with the regulation. But it also needs consultancy services, both from the public side, from universities, but also private consultancy, because the small actors that implement the measures, they are not always able to create in-house capacities for this topic, which is not the mainstream pocket, but also in the future maybe only one of the elements of the portfolio of local water management. When it comes now also very concretely to the water reuse regulation and the recast and the revision and evaluation, here it is kind of what we would wish for here, or the actors of the WaterMan project, is that it would develop into a coherent EU-wide guiding framework for using water of different qualities. This would give implementers clearer orientation, facilitate communication with authorities, and may also promote a sense of security of using recycled water on the side of consumers, if there are clear rules that at the moment apply only for agricultural irrigation. So why? And of course, better tailoring to the demands and potentials of human regions mean to add beyond municipal wastewater and agricultural irrigation, as it is the focus today, further utilizations like urban irrigation, toilet flushing, canal flushing, groundwater research, so very concrete things that are typical use cases, and also further water sources, meaning in particular rainwater and stormwater, and also industrial wastewater to this, but I understand that this is partly on the way. So these are kind of this when it comes to the scope. When it comes to also how it is designed, the risk-based approach of the regulation is appreciated, but we see also that small local actors are not able to do this themselves. It is complicated for them. We needed assistance for that, and here it would be wishful to simplify it for example, by implementation guidelines or standards for typical and widespread use cases. And a last thing is also, because we had one of these incidents, also to limit member state opt-outs through stricter justification criteria, and criteria that take notice of the fact that water scarcity is nothing that occurs on national level, but very locally. And there is where the problem occurs. So that is about the regulations. And one last thing that we would like to mention is that this is the same slide. When it comes to the further dialogue on water recycling, here we want to summarize and to state that water recycling is ready to get started right away and more broadly, but there is still a lot to improve and to learn from each other. So knowledge exchange and peer learning within the professional community is very important also in the future, and it should also be continued internationally. But we would also like to stress that at the same time, climate change has turned water management and water recycling from an expert task into a political and strategic issue, in particular on the local level. And that calls also for involving non-experts into the dialogue and setting the priorities at different levels: local, regional, national, international. And last but not least, also what we need is, and that was one of the side remarks that I would like to close with, we need also an easier to understand communication and more unified terminology that clears out this expert speak that we have about water recycling, so that it's really understandable for those who in the end have to take the strategic decisions in order to implement it or not. So that was my presentation of the WaterMan inputs to the policy discussions. Yeah, I would like to suggest that maybe the panelists can now join me here in the panel, and then we would open the further discussion in both directions, maybe also first enabling questions to these inputs, but then also further questions and a broader discussion. So, are there any immediate comments or questions to both, going back to Loïc's presentation and the presentation, so Tobias' presentation that I just spoke out here on the inputs and the experiences from the grassroots level in the WaterMan project? Clara.
Yes, thank you. We just comment that when we see these presentations, a lot happens. really a lot. So we are discussing, and there are a lot of products that are already produced and we can use. So the question is what the next, yes, what we can do just to go this snowball growing. It's the question to all of us.
Yeah, Emmanuel, you have gone this way for 23 years already. So what would you recommend? What should be the next steps?
Well, I will first define what we do. So in 22, we started with wastewater reuse from the local wastewater treatment plant. So we reuse the effluent using a multi-barrel approach. And we infiltrate it into the dune area. So in fact, we mimic the natural water cycle. And we are based in a touristic area, so it means that we have a huge variation. So the result after more than 23 years of experience is that we have a very good drinking water quality, better than before because we have lower hardness. We have been able to secure the water demand, so that's very important, especially in the touristic area. And of course, which was very important, we have improved the natural quality of the dune area. So that was one of the purposes. And to answering your question, what we need to do is you have to go for it. You can discuss about projects and ideas, but once you have to start, there will always be minor risks. You can't control anything, everything. But I have what Jens told in his presentation is a very good thing that I also always mention. The cost to go from a wastewater treatment plant to water reuse is really minor if you start thinking about a new wastewater treatment plant. So I'm in favor of integrated water management. I'm in favor of integrated water companies because then you take care, you consider every consumer, every stakeholders. So my approach is also try to collaborate in the field. That's, I think that's very important. But if we go for a more integrated water management approach, we can achieve more projects more easily. But always consider risk. So risk approach is mandatory in every project you mentioned. I also want to comment, that's what you asked me before, on your WaterMan project. Rainwater use is a very good thing, and we do it in Flanders, I think, since ages. I've never known else since I was young. We reuse rainwater, but we reuse it for the flushing the toilets or washing machines. Now I see developments where so it's a good thing. It's now mandatory in Flanders to have your rainwater reservoir, and it's mandatory to make an infiltration of the excess of rainwater, which is good because then you keep it in the environment. What I see and what I don't like is that now there are tools available where they reuse water locally in houses, in apartments, but that's not sustainable because it uses a lot of energy, it causes a lot of risks, so it's not good for the climate change if you use an excess of energy. So I will not favor that, but local reuse in households of rainwater, we do it since ages. There are also discussions about frameworks. I think this is one of your questions. We already have a lot of frameworks, and so if you want to use drinking water like we do, we have drinking water quality. And I think risk approach is the best way to go. But what I see as the biggest threat, and the girl was mentioning PFAS, but there are other compounds. So what we really need to avoid in the future is that we have another kind of substances that we can't treat. We have to avoid, implement. We are discussing again about REACH, so we have to strengthen REACH, that we will not be faced with other compounds like PFAS. 1,2,4-triazoles is now a new issue, so we have to avoid this. This is the most important thing, I think, for regulatory thing in Europe, and not having extra frameworks for. We already have all the frameworks we need. So if we do that, we will be a step forward, I think.
The inputs here from the WaterMan project, they were inputs of mostly, you can say, beginners in water recycling. Now you are very experienced. Did you see anything in these recommendations that you would say, this I would not support, that I would stress less, or things that I would stress more? Or do you say that your long-time experiences and this very fresh beginner's perspective complies very well?
When we started doing the test was in the 1990s, so there was few experience. Now there's a lot of experience, but I would always recommend not to rush and to take your time, and also to do pilots anyway. They shouldn't be the same length of we did pilots for 3 to 5 years. They shouldn't last that long anymore because you have all this experience, but it's still important to do pilots because every water is different, and it depends who is connected to a network, to a sewer network. So you can't compare our system with a system in Berlin or in anywhere else. So you have to really have the knowledge about the system, and I think doing short pilots is mandatory to avoid problems afterwards. Also, knowledge is very important. It's not like putting ultrafiltration system or reverse osmosis system there, and it's not a play and plug system. There's really a lot of chemistry behind it. So it's really important to have a good knowledge of your system, of the techniques, of the quality, I think.
Okay. Maybe also relating to this, and maybe a question to you, Pia, you had in the project the task to help and advise also very small entities to get started with water recycling. And one task was, of course, also to go into risk management and risk assessment and risk management in line with the water reuse regulation that requires it. Maybe you can see, Emmanuel is representing a utility that has kind of a lot of in-house knowledge and maybe also capacities to go into these issues. What is your experiences with these newcomers that you explained? Is this a framework that makes sense, that is feasible for you, or do they need help? And if they do so, what could be ways to simplify this for them, if it should be a barrier?
I think drawing from my experience from WaterMan, I had the feeling that the knowledge and awareness about risk in general, the concept of risk, also the risk assessment and risk management was little among the partners because it was beginners. It's municipalities or it was mainly municipalities. So I had the feeling that their capacity raising and awareness raising is important, first of all. But we had one partner explicitly who did make a risk assessment and risk management plan. That was our partner from Kalmar. And they managed themselves to do the qualitative risk assessment. And I think they did that really well. They got to know their system, they talked about it. They didn't really have to refer to me at all in that sense. So that was, I think, quite feasible and a good learning, I think. But when it gets to more complex approaches, like chemical risk assessments, also more complex, but quantitative risk assessment approaches, I think that's something that needs support. And these support that may be experts, for example, that have the knowledge, so external experts, or tools they could use. KWB has someone that's a quantitative microbial risk assessment tool, and another one we're setting up for chemicals. But yes, I see a need for support for quantitative approaches. And what we also see is when it comes to chemical risk assessment and management, in general, that there is a lack of guidance there, especially when it is about groundwater protection. And quantitative chemical risk assessment. There is no standardized way so far. So we see a lack of guidance that could be based on a European level as well, to avoid that all the countries do their own thing, to streamline approaches and to learn together. And yes, Manuel.
Add to that, I think this is a good point because we're confronted all the time with new emergent substances. Recently we had TFA, 1,2,4-triazoles, I already mentioned. What happens is that in the Netherlands they put a value of 2, in Flanders 1 of 4, in Germany 1 of 5. So I think we should have a European guidance if some pollutant is coming up, that we have a general rule for that, because in the directive you can't define all parameters. You don't even know them all the time. But once we have them, and it's overall in Europe, we should have one standard, I think. And this is something lacking because now they make values, I don't know, but they can go, for instance, TFA, we put in Flanders 1 of 15.7 micrograms. In Holland, it's 2.2, I think. So consumers don't understand that. And for us, it's also difficult because we're not aware of the toxicity of the stuff. That's not our business, but there should be a common approach in Europe, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Loïc,
if I can react a little bit on that. It's a little bit the same challenge that we have with the directive. The purpose of a directive is to provide an objective, not the mean to achieve the objective. So it lets a lot of freedom for the member state to implement the directive. But we see from the people on the ground that they complain because you do not have enough a strict framework for that. On the other side, we have the member state who say, please let us know dealing with our own specificity and so on. So you have always this balance, and you have the EU expert who try to provide some guidance to reply to that. If we look, for example, for water reuse, it's the diversity of the parameter that you need to check is quite huge. And so it's the same for the chemical. And when they try to do something at the European Union, and we just finished the revision of the EQSD, it was a nightmare for the EU policymaker because nobody were able to find a common ground, and I think they had more than 40 meetings to achieve it. So I'm not sure the best option is to have more. To have stricter or parameter, but I think it's more linked to the river basin. And it's a little bit a point that you were making, that the utility of the region, I'm not sure they are the best place to have this approach to harmonize and simplify the element. I think if we can have something from the source to the sea, where you have the region involved, where you have the utilities involved, but a structure that can take the lead at that moment, can simplify where we put the monitoring tools, what we want to monitor. We agreed on the parameter, on the threshold, and so on. That could work. We have plenty of examples from the EU project, for example, between Latvia and Lithuania. For the upstream, they comply with the EU legislation. With the downstream, they don't comply with the EU legislation because the transposition is different. But if you have a river basin management authority that take the lead at that moment, said, okay, we harmonize for this river basin the parameter and we agree on, that could work and simplify, I think, the life of a lot of people. And I think it's a competence center from Berlin who work for the Olympic Games in Paris. for the digital tools for the quality of the river. At the beginning, we saw some challenges in the news between Paris, the municipality, and to implement the stuff. As soon as it went a little bit higher, with a more holistic perspective on the river, it worked better. And I don't remember the name of the project, but
It's of colleagues of mine. I don't remember either, but
Mm-hmm.
it's, we have a specialized risk department, and they're really into microbial risk.
But I think all of you addressed the need also for structural changes on the local level in the organization of water management and integrated water management. Yeah, you addressed rather the geographic dimension. Emmanuel, you stressed that wastewater and drinking water is something that needs to be integrated, or all sources of water integratedly managed. So, Clara, you are representing here the Polish, the Economic Chamber Polish Waterworks, and also Euro, and in this sense also, you are representing the entities we are talking about. So what is your perspective of it as the voice of the utilities here in the panel?
Yes, the Chamber of Economy Polish Waterworks is a member of Euro. So we exchange ideas, and you can see our position paper on water use. However, here I would like to express broader point of view of water utilities in scope of our WaterMan project, Renew Water project, other projects that work on this issue, how to manage this local water circuit, so how to close these very local solutions and implement circular water economy at local level. And wastewater treatment plant, they are part of municipalities, so there is no city without water services. So we really want to implement these sustainable solutions, and that's why water use is something very obvious for us. So we reuse water internally, for example, at wastewater treatment plant, just not to use drinking water for, I don't know, grid washing or devices washing, etc. But in our opinion, and according to the survey we also had, because agriculture in northern part of Europe is quite reluctant toward water use, so this yak factor and this using water reclaimed for this dirty water is something that they don't like, because they have still a lot of water available in nature, because the law just let agriculture to use this natural water. So wastewater treatment plant, they see the potential in using reclaimed water at municipalities for lawn irrigation, for greenery caring, etc. So this is the most important goal of wastewater treatment plant operators.
Thank you. And you stress the openness, and when it comes to structures, do you think that this is something that with the existing structures of utilities that could be well managed, or would you also see kind of to go into a structural discussion of water management at the local level? Is there a need or not?
I think that we can manage the structure. However, in my opinion, there are some political barriers, because we are, for example, we are local monopolies. So we are a regulated market with tariffs, with affordability goals. So business models are something challenging in water use, and we have to do it. If we just close this circular water economy, as you mentioned, in your water utilities, because after you serve this water to customers, maybe it is a bit easier, but considering that we would like to sell this water, for example, to the city, it could be a barrier. And I would like also to go back to this contaminant and micropollutants issue, because all the new current directives, they mention risk assessment, because we cannot live without risk assessment, because we have so many hazards that it's impossible to regulate them. However, we regulate in our law what already happened. So we already have these micropollutants in the environment, and we have to monitor it. So the first and the most important issue is the control at source. So preventing contaminants, micropollutants entering the environment. So that's why we propose, for example, the ban on PFAS. We cannot regulate PFAS. We have to ban them, just not use them in many applications that we cannot live without them. Because if we do not do it, we will never implement the Water Framework Directive and other directives, because we will have to extend environmental quality standards to many parameters.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, thank you, Clara. Maybe, Pia, maybe we can have a look into the chat if there are also questions from the online participants, and I would also like to open the discussion here to the audience in the room once again.
There is 2 questions to Loic regarding the policy. They have been here the whole time, so they've been waiting for you. The first one is, I think it refers directly to your presentation. In what sense does water disappear when going from EU to regional level? Does it mean funded projects through cohesion funds or national funds?
I can start with this one.
Yeah.
No, it's so I will speak with my little experience in dealing with that at the regional level. So the Commission provide money for the cohesion funds and give some priorities. Water is in. Then after you have a national plan developed by the national stakeholders. Then you have a regional plan developed by the regional stakeholders. And when you arrive here at this new political forum, generally water disappeared a little bit. You have some region, for example, financing most of their activity, up to 60% of the regional funds goes with that. So they will finance part of their administration, part of their priorities. And water is generally not a priority, a sexy priority, I would say, for the local policy makers. It's what I was telling. If you need to make an investment, it's for 50 years. Either you need to increase the price of water, either you need to figure out how to have a loan, so you create debt, or you need to request money somewhere somehow, and you will hit the budget from the other part. So if I am a policy maker, it's not my priority, or I will drop the hot potato to the next one. So for this reason, water in generally not a priority when you go more and more with these 3 layers. After, I will not enter in the discussion of the cohesion policy architecture, but this is one of the things that we see when we deal with water.
There is the second one, it's on prioritizing water. So how to prioritize water in cohesion policy funding when there is nowadays a lot of competition from the security sector?
That is all. I think it's where the local and regional authorities, but also the local stakeholders had, and including the utilities, have a role to play. Because you are the one on the ground, you have the one with the contact with the policymaker, you have the one who can influence the local political life or the national political life. Unfortunately, I don't speak 23 languages, and I don't have the time to go in all the capital, but I think if it comes also from the local stakeholders, it will be more impactful, and you will have the possibility to make a priority. But it needs to have a bottom-up perspective on that. It's not from Brussels that we need to impose and say, hey, you need to make it a priority. We can advise, but after the European legislation, moreover, is implemented in a very diversified country, from French Guiana to Iceland to Cyprus, and you pass by the Alps. So the debate and the topic and the type of investment that you need to do are completely different. So that needs absolutely to come from the bottom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. Are there further questions? If not, we are almost at the end of the time already. Maybe one last question to Liek, as you are the observer of the policy discussions here in Brussels, and yeah, you get to know also today the grassroots perspective from the Baltic Sea and what we intend to do and would like to do. So if you compare the discussions and these perspectives, does this match? Is there hope that the points that we address are taken up into the further discussions? Or maybe did you find also something that you see that is not considered so far to the same extent, and that maybe also be addressed in the further discussions on the implementation of the water resilience strategy? About that, did you find anything about it? Or the other way around, would you have any specific recommendations how we could kind of go on with pushing these things forward?
I think the water community is quite consensual. So we have more or less the same conclusion. After it depends a little bit of the degree, but we are lucky in that way that when we have a different association and so on, we are pushing in the same direction for 95%, I would say. So, and the conclusion of the project confirm what we heard and so on. I think more the advice, and it's echo with what I was saying before, it's go to speak to your local and regional authorities. This is where you will have a strong impact, because at the end, they are the one in the driver's seat to implement, no matter how many documents that we can issue here, especially that for the regulation now, it's we need to calm down. So it will be more in the hands of the other levels of governance that we can see progress. So clearly go and speak to these levels.
Okay, thank you very much, Loic, for this conclusion of this little panel discussion. So just in the very end now of the project, I would like to thank the panelists here for the contributions, and also the audience for questions and contributions. And in the very end, just a little bit of an outlook, and also, yeah, just continuing what you just suggested. This is actually what the WaterMan project will do. When it comes to further dialogue and peer learning events that may also be interesting for you, on the one hand, there will be possibilities for on-site visits of pilot measures in the countries. So these 10 measures that we mentioned in the next month, so that you may register to, and there you can get experience on the spot and by hands-on experts. And we will also, and this is something, the invitation and the registration will be open soon. We will also have our final WaterMan conference and the ERB Dialogue Forum, Water Recycling in Practice in Kalmar. And there we will exactly do what you just suggested. We will continue this dialogue that we started here in Brussels, also with local, with regional, and with national authorities. And on top of that, it will also be something for practitioners, because we will have on-site visits of pilot measures, and also the water recycling plant Kalmarsundsverket in Kalmar, a major investment in our regions that is to be open in 2028 according to the plans, and also opportunities for participants to meet hands-on experts on water recycling from the project team of all 6 countries that were involved. Stay tuned for the announcement and the registration here. We would also like to point once again on our water recycling toolbox and help desk, which may provide further information and guidance of those who want to get started with water recycling. And but not least, we also would like to recommend to get in the loop, which is our little 3-step guided tour of water recycling, our newsletter that you can sign in to, and with which we will inform you step by step in the next 3 months on practical insights from the WaterMan project, but also, for example, we will summarize this discussion that we had here today. So thank you very much once again for the panelists, for the audience here in the room, and the audience that joined us online, and we hope to see many of you again in 2 weeks, I think 3 weeks, in Kalmar in Sweden, and there we will have a look on the issue in reality. So thank you very much for today.